Good morning, colleagues. Very pleased to welcome you at this meeting. We will just give a few seconds so that people come in the webinar. Yes, I can see people still joining. Give us 10 seconds and we'll start. Edward, can you just speak so that we are sure that we can hear you?
Sure. Good morning, everyone.
Excellent. Thank you, Edward. Excellent. Let's start, colleagues. I would like to welcome you to this event, focusing on the role of local and regional governments in international humanitarian action. My name is Antu. I am the co-director of the Global Cities Hub. For those who don't know us, we are an organization based in Geneva that pursues two objectives. First is to connect cities and regions to the UN, other international organizations, to enhance the influence of cities and regions at the international level. And for that, we encourage international organizations to work with cities and vice versa. And the second objective that we pursue is that we promote the urban on the agenda of the international community, because we all know that our future is urban. I'm very pleased to co-host this meeting today with OCHA, the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. And please remember this acronym, because I will be using OCHA pretty often, at least not only myself, but also colleagues here. First, before starting, sincere thanks to the German Marshall Fund for its support in reaching out to many cities. Paul, if you're with us, many thanks for your help. Also would like to express appreciation to Catalonia and Jersey, who's online, for also helping us to reach out to different cities and regions. And thank you for also being here to share your experience with us today. So today's meeting has been set up for cities and regions specifically to get to know OCHA, what it does on the humanitarian front, how cities and regions can contribute to humanitarian aid through OCHA. A lot of cities and regions already have their own program to support development elsewhere or to contribute to humanitarian action. Often that support is done bilaterally, either through NGOs that you know, or directly basically to cities and regions with whom you have an established relationship. But today, we'll focus on how cities and regions can contribute to the international efforts through multilateral organizations, aiming at bringing humanitarian need in different humanitarian contexts. And so we'll discuss how basically contributing through the UN is the most efficient, effective way to make use of your resources and bring humanitarian aid where needs have been clearly identified. As an outcome of this meeting today, I very much hope that you'll get strong arguments about how investing into the UN is, again, the most effective, efficient way to bring humanitarian aid to people in need. So today the event will start with a keynote speech, followed by a panel discussion with a Q&A. So keep your questions for that part. And we'll start with a keynote speaker today with Ramesh Rajasingam. You are the head and representative of OCHA in Geneva, and you will set the scene with a brief introduction about OCHA, the global humanitarian landscape, and key priorities of the humanitarian community. So the floor is yours. I'll just ask you to speak close to the microphone so that people can hear you. Ramesh. Yes, the camera is here. I know it's very confusing, but...
Yeah. We need to get one of these. Thank you very much, Shantu. It's a huge pleasure to be here today with all of you. I think this is my first time at the Global Hub here, Cities Hub, and hopefully not the last one, because I think we would like to have a constant cooperation. As you mentioned, this marks the first ever meeting between the humanitarian sector, ourselves, regional authorities and cities, at a time when we are grappling with multiple crises and unprecedented challenges around the world. So we see today's interaction as an invaluable opportunity to exchange perspectives on humanitarian issues from our side, and also to explore areas in which we can collaborate between regional authorities, cities, and also the broader humanitarian system within which we operate, particularly for OCHA, and I will explain how OCHA does this. And this collaboration cannot be overstated in terms of urgency. We have catastrophic levels of humanitarian need today, and the role of cities and regional partners in this, in addressing this, is going to be crucial as we go ahead. And you mentioned also the urban element of your work. Increasingly, we need to improve the way we work in urban areas and support them, and so that sort of collaboration is super important. And we'll also be looking to work closely with agencies like Habitat, etc., on these issues. So we see a lot of the crisis coming in urban areas today. So let me just perhaps briefly introduce OCHA and our mandate. We were established in 1991 by the UN General Assembly. We came on the heels of the end of the Cold War, so that was an opportunity for us to have an expansion of humanitarian activities, but also the introduction of humanitarian principles in the way we work throughout the globe. We ensure that people affected by crisis receive the help they need quickly and effectively. And this includes life-saving assistance in all sorts of sectors: health, shelter, water and sanitation, nutrition, but also protection, ensuring their rights are protected, especially those vulnerable groups when you have crisis who are exploited and abused particularly. Now, our primary role as OCHA is to avoid gaps of duplication in the coordination of humanitarian response efforts. Why? Because you have multiple actors. You literally have hundreds of humanitarian actors out there. They all have different boards of governance, and they all have different donors. So how do we coordinate this in those situations? We have to assess the scale of the crisis, identify the areas where help is most urgently needed, and guide how aid can be delivered in the best possible way to them. And as I mentioned, we also want to advocate and stand up for the rights of those affected by crisis, make sure that their voices can be heard globally, because in many cases, those voices were silent during the crisis and even before the crisis. But we also want to make sure that the aid system is fair, it's transparent, and it's accountable, and so that aid reaches the people who need it the most. So we want to be held accountable to the affected population as well as to our donors, obviously. Our core part of this mission is to ensure that financial resources are available when and where they are needed. We don't just advocate for funding. We directly manage two critical pool funds on behalf of donors, the Central Emergency Response Fund and the country-based pool funds. And my colleague Anya, who's next to me, will kindly brief on these funds shortly. Let me just perhaps give you a little bit of an idea of the global humanitarian landscape. We are today at a critical juncture, driven by a complex mix of conflicts, climate extremes, economic shocks, and rising inequality, massive income gaps. Global needs are at record levels. Last year, nearly almost 200 million people required urgent humanitarian assistance, or we were trying to target 200 million people last year. That's almost the entire population of Brazil, for an idea. Conflict continues to be the primary driver today of hunger, with millions facing catastrophic food insecurity in Haiti, Sudan, Nigeria, Mozambique, and beyond. We just saw what happened in Gaza as well during the conflict. So that risk of famine that we thought we had ended in the 1980s has resurfaced again. Health crises such as the cholera outbreak in Sudan and Zambia and polio in Afghanistan are compounding already immense suffering, not to mention the economic impact of COVID, which has also led to massive humanitarian vulnerability. And then climate shocks are becoming more and more frequent and severe. Floods in the Sahel, Droughts in Southern Africa have displaced millions and deepened food insecurity. And I suspect at some point in the future, we may even see the climate crisis impact overtaking conflict as a major driver of migration and displacement. In some places, the most basic requirement for humanitarian action, such as access to vulnerable groups, has become nearly impossible. We're working in situations where humanitarians have lost their innocence, and it's difficult to get through to the populations. In Sudan, Gaza, the Ukraine, and Yemen, humanitarian aid is obstructed, and aid workers themselves have become targets, and humanitarian aid has also become politicized. And this past year has been the deadliest for aid workers on record. 281 humanitarian workers lost their lives, and 525 faced major attacks while doing their duty. These are not just statistics, they are the face of courageous individuals who stood in solidarity with the most vulnerable people, often at great personal risk. And many of them were part of the affected population, because the vast majority of that figure comes from Gaza, where we lost hundreds of UNRWA staff, plus also their families, their wives, their children, their spouses, and their children. Funding remains another critical challenge, and despite the generosity of donors, global humanitarian appeals were funded at only 45.5% last year. And this underfunding forces the humanitarian community to make difficult choices, often curtailing vital assistance to those in desperate need. And yet, despite these immense challenges, restricted access and rising threats, we have persevered as humanitarian organizations. Last year, aid agencies reached 116 million people across the globe with life-saving support. And that reflects the tireless efforts of humanitarian organization staff and volunteers who operate on the front lines in very dangerous situations. However, we cannot meet these challenges alone. In 2025, the humanitarian community has requested a staggering $45 billion to assist 185 million people across the two countries. And this figure reflects the scale of global suffering, but also moral imperative and an appeal to the global community to act with urgency and compassion. And we can't do this, obviously, without speaking about the recent events of the last week with US funding. And I think Anil can perhaps speak more to that. So what can we do about this? The international community must rise to meet this bleak reality with bold action. And let me just suggest a few key priorities in which we can do this. We have to transform the humanitarian system. Humanitarian crises are evolving constantly, so we have to do much more to transform the system to be able to be agile to meet that. And OCHA is leading efforts to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the humanitarian response. This includes streamlining operations and leveraging new technologies to ensure better outcomes for affected communities. And secondly, it includes promoting localization. Local actors are often the first responders in a crisis. By empowering them and channeling resources through local non-governmental organizations and community organizations, we ensure faster and more sustainable responses. We would like to hand over to them at the end and lead the situation and allow them to be looking after their lives. Thirdly, we need to strengthen partnerships with cities and regional authorities. Cities and regional authorities have a unique role to play in bridging funding gaps and mobilizing resources for international humanitarian efforts. Their proximity to affected populations makes them vital partners in delivering timely aid. But in addition to that, we need a strategic cooperation with you, because you have skills and competencies that we don't have, and an understanding. And how can we incorporate that into our work and ensure that we get the best possible advice in addressing urban issues? Fourthly, we need to diversify our donor engagement. Engaging new donors, including philanthropies and the private sector, is essential for us, and their contributions can complement traditional funding and sustain humanitarian operations in underfunded areas. But again, when it comes to the private sector, it's not just about funding, it's what they can bring in terms of technology, innovation, and other capacities that we don't necessarily have, but that can help us transform our systems. Fifthly, it's how do we integrate development actors such as banks and international development organizations into our work. To reduce humanitarian needs, development actors must step in earlier to address the root causes of crisis, particularly the economic ones, and in fragile and conflict-affected areas, because humanitarian actors are not a solution. We are a stopgap measure, we are a band-aid, but increasingly we've been seen as the only actor in protracted crisis for decades. And the moment you do that, you actually downplay the resilience facilities and factors of a local population. And how do you strengthen this? And the way to strengthen this is through development action. So in conclusion, we have a call to action. Today we'll hear from Catalonia and Jersey as well about their experiences with our humanitarian system and how they channel assistance to those in need. And we look forward to that. Their examples highlight the potential for greater collaboration between local authorities and the global humanitarian community. And thank you very much for your time and for this opportunity as well. And we look forward to a fruitful discussion. And together we can rise to meet all these challenges. We are one humanity after all, and how do we make sure we connect the dots and they come together? So thank you very much for this opportunity again.
Thank you, Ramesh. Thanks for establishing the context, basically, around OCHA and the UN in general. I think it's very important for our audience to understand, basically, that your work is really global, that you have an overview of the humanitarian action and aid everywhere where there are basically conflicts and disasters. It's a rather bleak picture that you presented about the global humanitarian landscape. It's not getting better, unfortunately, but we understand that we need the mobilization of all willing stakeholders, basically, and cities and regions are an important part of those different stakeholders. So let us now start with the panel discussion. We'll continue with OCHA. Anya Nietzsche, you are the Chief of Resource Mobilization Partnership Branch here at OCHA Geneva. You'll provide us with an overview of those pooled funds that you referred to in your introduction, Ramesh. And then we'll move on to hear from Catalonia and Jersey, who's online, and about their collaboration with the UN and OCHA in general. So Anya, you have the floor.
Thanks so
and
much.
Maybe, sorry, could you speak, maybe you take that microphone close to you, so
okay,
that
great.
people hear really well. Yeah, just, that's it. Perfect.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Please do let me know if I'm not visible here, but yeah, fantastic to meet all of you. Thank you so much. I'm too also in this wonderful setup, convening us, but also with a really interesting group of colleagues in the room and online. Not necessarily all of you are in regular contact with OCHA, but definitely we believe you should be, given that OCHA plays a very critical role in the whole UN system, in particular on humanitarian affairs. Ramesh has already outlined a lot, but something I like to remind people of is that OCHA is the only organization of the UN that actually has the H in its name, and we are a purely humanitarian organization. So all the other agencies are actually going beyond humanitarian, and are double-headed, triple-headed sometimes, as we say, but for OCHA, really, we are purely humanitarian. We have this coordination mandate, and that also gives us a different way of engaging, because we are, fully following the humanitarian principles of neutrality, impartiality, and independence. So in that context, we play a different role, coordinating at different levels and also bringing the latest information on what is needed, but also what is currently done, where the gaps are to the world. So that is something, that clearly defines our mandate. And of course, also this role is quite relevant to cities and regional authorities as well, we believe. Just in terms of the title of this panel discussion, the role of local and regional authorities in humanitarian action, Ramesh has already outlined a lot. Let me just also give a little bit of some thoughts, why, the local and regional authorities are such a unique set of actors that should engage and are already engaging humanitarian affairs. So first of all, as you know better than we do, but city authorities and regional authorities are usually much closer to the people than national governments. And they are the first line also that is being held accountable if things are not working or if there are problems, right? If there's a pothole in the street where you live, you would probably write a letter of complaint to the mayor, right? Or the mayor's office. You know, if the schools are not working, etc. If the trains are not running, first point of contact are the regional authorities or the city also that is running the bus system, etc. So that I think really provides a very unique position, and also of course adds you know, an additional line of response that we have seen always, you know, that is much faster, you know, by these authorities and also particular mayors, but also for regions, because they are just closer to the problem, much less bureaucratic, faster, and definitely, you know, something that we should build on, because this is exactly what is needed in the humanitarian space. We cannot wait, right? And we also need to feel the responsibility to respond. Second, urban settings and regions have a lot of resources, usually in terms of human capital. We know that, and you know this again better than we do, but 80% of all people in the world are, you know, will be living in urban settings, and actually more and more also in mega cities. You know, this is the trend, and here it's not just human resources, but it's a conglomeration of businesses, right, that we see also in urban centers, but also regional centers, because more and more also urban centers are being defined in collaboration with other urban centers, little cities, etc., surrounding them, and definitely play there a big role. So business conglomeration, then in addition knowledge, access to knowledge, because all the big universities, research institutions, science, etc., of course have a strong center in these settings, but also access to media and outreach, right? There's so much power in terms of defining also the narrative and having access to local channels. Again, media probably that enjoy more trust these days than national channels. So these are all resources that we would like also to put to better use in the humanitarian space, given that you know, there's so much need, as already pointed out by Ramesh. Third, we've seen, and Ramesh alluded to this, cities, regions are very quick in responding to emergencies. Frontline responders, they're the first ones on site, working in collaboration with local NGOs, but also local businesses, regional businesses, having the ability to mobilize. Very often you wait quite a long time for national governments to mobilize, but you know, the first ones on site, in particular during emergencies and also climate disasters, any type of other crises, are your basically institutions and partners. So plus also mentioning that, of course, the magnitude of the scale of the crises that we are up to, and especially in the future, related to climate change, etc., will, you know, rise. And first epicenters are again those areas where we have many people living, right, and we have dense population. So just to mention that you're already playing actually a very, very strong role in the humanitarian response in many different aspects. Ramesh was talking about financial, of course, dimensions of this. He was talking about operational support. He was talking about the strategic engagement, and definitely there's a lot of room also to further nurture this and work much closer also at the UN, with these institutions, mechanisms, and partnerships and networks that you actually run. So we promised to tell you a bit more about our pooled funds, given that they are actually the flagship funds that we have at our disposal to quickly respond to the humanitarian crises. 3 reasons why you should actually care about these pooled funds. First one, they're definitely great tools, and I hope we will hear more also from our panelists on this, because they are the ones that actually are the most fast and agile funds that we have in operation at the UN level. For the SURF, we can actually operate as fast as within 6 minutes. That was the record that we were breaking last year, because we really have very quick mechanisms of allocating funding to wherever crisis erupts and emergency are. So sometimes even in advance of crises, because we have this framework that is called anticipatory action. So the whole idea is actually to act ahead of crises. And here we have identified very specific parameters for us to allocate resources when certain triggers are being pushed. And this means when we have indication that communities are in distress, climate, different indicators have been met, when we know, for instance, floods are rising, but also other indicators, we can actually already advance funding before this is happening, which is actually allowing for a much more effective and faster response, but also cheaper response. Because just as an example, we can start boring, for instance, boreholes when we know there's water shortage. In cities, in regions before. We can support the purchasing of seeds to farmers already in advance, because we know after crisis, emergency, actually prices are going up dramatically and they might not be accessible. We support evacuating of livestock, but also different settlements that are under threat, etc., etc. So makes total sense. The SURF is actually the instrument at the moment that funds most of the anticipatory action worldwide. So there's more to say whether these are great tools, and you should know about it. But quickly, we have the SURF, which is the Central Emergency Response Fund. I already talked about this, under the Secretary General. So this is a tool that works for the entire world, and whenever there is need, then we will be able to allocate funding regardless where. Second, we have the country-based pooled funds, and also our panelists, both of you, Gabrielle and Edward, you will be able to talk about this. You're generous supporters of these country-based pooled funds. They're operating in 20 different contexts, and they're pooling resources for humanitarian action in individual contexts. And this is a bit more longer term engagement, but they're particularly strong in working with local organizations and channeling funding already to those. So we are at 46% of funding that goes directly through these pool funds to local organizations. Many of them also work in collaboration with international organizations and other partners. So it is actually also a tool, these country-based pool funds, that benefit many of the partners you're working with, and potentially also your individual organizations if you represent those here today. At the moment, we really believe that these 2 tools that we have at our disposal are really important to support because we know that there is a big threat that we are currently facing to more broadly to the multilateral system and everything we have in place, in particular to those instruments that we have to demonstrate international solidarity and support. So definitely a plea also to everyone to consider what we have available as instruments of global solidarity and support those, because there are many destructive forces at the moment that really put those in question. So a big concern also from us. For the SURF, for instance, we have 60 contributors at this point in time, 75, including member states, but also private entities, but also regional authorities. Cities are not there yet, but definitely also ones we would like to work with. But also from the member state base, we have a very broad member state base that supports the SURF, including from member states that actually receive funding also and have been past recipients. So there is this is really an instrument that demonstrates that actually many member states, regardless where they are located geographically, care about the SURF. And I think it's quite unique in that context right now. The third one I wanted to mention is that the pooled funds definitely make business sense, also for investment for regional and city authorities, because I already mentioned we are actually pooling funding from many different sources and then providing grants to frontline responders in particular, but also to many partnerships with existing partners also abroad. For instance, Ukraine has the crisis in Ukraine, the war starting there in 2021 has sparked so much mobilization also from different levels of society, but many cities have been heavily engaged and regions also to support the response in Ukraine. And our funding that we have provided there also went to many of those partnerships and same partners. So basically what I want to say, for every contribution you make, you actually have the potential to also receive further funding and more funding through our pooled funds. So it's actually a very good mechanism that could leverage these funds and provide even better return on investment. Let me stop here. Definitely looking forward to questions afterwards, but I would be really happy if we could hear from our panelists, in particular Gabriel and Edward, on their experience with OCHA more broadly and your collaboration, but also what your motivation is to work so closely and also sustainably with our different pooled funds.
Thank you so much, Anya. Let me grab this back. Thank you so much for your presentation, for introducing us to the pooled funds, that kind of pot of money where, a lot of donors from different backgrounds put their money, preposition the resources so that they can be allocated very quickly in case of humanitarian crisis, anywhere where it needs to be. You talked about, that was very interesting, and we will probably come back to that, this capacity to innovate with funding anticipatory action, which I think is pretty unique with the SURF, this kind of big global pooled fund. And then you also talked about this country-based pooled fund, which are based in those countries where you have acute humanitarian crisis. You mentioned Ukraine, but we also have Sudan, Palestine, of course, Ethiopia, Yemen, 23 of those contexts. Thank you so much for that. Let me now turn to Catalonia. We have Agustí Fernández de Losada. You are the Secretary for European Affairs, Multilateral Relations and Cooperation for Development, and Catalonia has been contributing to those pooled funds. since 2018 for the SURF, I think. So you have quite a number of years, you know, a little bit of distance to basically provide us with an overview of what have been the benefits for you, for your government, for your regional government, but also for the people basically that you serve. So Agusti, you have the floor. Maybe take the other one. Sorry about this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, let me tell you first that it's a pleasure to share this conversation with you. I would say for two very specific reasons. First one, more personal, I have also an urban background. I've been leading for many years the Global Cities program at CIDOP, the Barcelona Center for International Affairs. So also approaching this issue from the urban, the city perspective. Today, I'm doing the same, but from the regional perspective and not within the research community, but in the government. And I'm really pleased to share our strategies with you. I would say a strategy that focus very much on the need to support multilateralism, and I will deepen on that in my brief intervention. But also, we have a very clear and strong commitment with international development cooperation. I would say is a long-standing commitment that goes beyond political parties, that is very installed in the Catalan society, and that has a very clear expression in a very concrete public policy on development cooperation. Both multilateralism, support to multilateral organization and to the multilateral system, and development cooperation are today two key priorities in our government plan, in what we can define as our foreign action policy. And let me also tell you and share with you, and I'm sure we will all agree with that this is especially relevant in the current context. In the current context where some governments, some national governments are withdrawing the multilateral system and are cancelling humanitarian and development assistance. So I think mobilizing decentralized cooperation, mobilizing cities, regions today is more relevant than ever. I was saying our development cooperation policy is a long-standing effort. We have a law, our policy is regulated by a regional law that was issued in 2001, so more than 24 years. Now we have a strategic plan or a master plan that articulates the way we implement the policy. This plan was approved by the previous government and will be implemented by the current government. And for me, this is a very clear evidence on this mainstream commitment with development cooperation that almost all parties political parties in our parliament, not all, but almost all political parties in our parliament are expressing. Our policy in this field has, let's say, like two relevant developments. The first one is budgetary. There is a commitment to reach 0.7% by 2030. It's a complex endeavor. We are today around 0.28, 0.3. That means around 90 million euros. But we're struggling to approve the budget. So this context of polarization affect not only national governments, affect also regional governments. So we're struggling also with these commitments, but we're there with the efforts. And as I was saying, we are also committed to implement the master plan, our master plan that has a very clear focus on what we call feminist development cooperation. We very much focus on human rights and and gender policies and facing inequalities, etc. And within the plan, and also included in the law, there is a specific objective on humanitarian action. So we have a specific strategic objective in the master plan that focus on development on humanitarian action and emergencies. This is also included in the law. So that there is a legal mandate to focus or to bring our development cooperation policy or our ODA to support emergencies and humanitarian action. We have a minimum of 10% of our budget devoted to humanitarian action, and we mainly operate through 2 channels. And I'll go now to OCHA. The first one is supporting multilateral organization, and here we very much appreciate the partnership with OCHA. We have been contributing to the SURF mechanisms since 2018, so we have a stable collaboration, small but stable. So we are decentralized cooperation. We are not. But I would say we are one of the most active actors also in this field. And we are also contributing to the pooled funds, to country-based pooled funds. Last year, 2024, with I think a bit more than 1 million euros to support these instruments in Palestine, Lebanon, and also in Ukraine. So we very much appreciate this collaboration, and I will refer myself to the added value in my concluding remarks. But I think we have a second channel that I would define as an effort to localize humanitarian action, also mobilizing more local in Catalonia capacities, resources, and actors. And we have also here a strong partnership with certain organizations operating from Catalonia, but with presence in Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, in Ukraine, in many fragile environments and countries. We launch every year a call for proposals that is focused on these organizations. But these organizations, for example, is Oxfam, which are quite strong organizations, also with a capacity to operate in these fields. And here again, our main objective is to bring humanitarian action to local realities, to localize. And this, I think, is very challenging. And this, I think, should be the key objective of this type of conversation. What is the added value of localizing humanitarian action? We are pretty sure of, I'm pretty convinced with the partnership with OCHA and with the multilateral system. I think it provides a very transparent, fast, secure, and effective means to channel our aid, our assistance. And I think this is relevant, especially in fragile countries, and also in emergencies, when this capacity to act very fast is relevant. It provides an added value. We are not able to operate in this way. I think the idea of localizing not only humanitarian action, but also the multilateral system is relevant, and bringing also humanitarian action and emergency to a broader conversation on how to redefine the multilateral system and to bring decentralized subnational governments to this, I would say, new multilateralism that is needed, I think is also relevant. Decentralized cooperation has the capacity, partnering with the multilateral system, partnering with OCHA, as you were already mentioning, to leverage, to mobilize funds and to mobilize citizens. And I think this proximity that we have with citizens I think is also very, very relevant. I insist the current context makes the involvement of decentralized cooperation. And I really think in many of our partners in the US, many partners that we have in Europe, in many countries that are were canceling or redefining their policies vis-a-vis the multilateral system, vis-a-vis development cooperation. I think these partnerships that we have with California, that we have, I don't know, with cities like Budapest, I think are very, very relevant. So looking forward to continuing with not only the conversation that I think is very timely and necessary, but also with the partnership with OCHA and with the UN and with the multilateral system, of course, with the Global Cities Hub. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gusti. Very interesting to hear, you know, that there is basically a very stable commitment from Catalonia to the multilateral system, to OCHA in general. Good to hear that, you know, that you can't do it yourself, but others can do, because they are, you know, they have the knowledge, the contacts, the networks, and basically the funds to do it very quickly. So thanks a lot for sharing that. It's honey to my ears when you say that you want to localize the multilateral system and bring subnational governments basically to what remains a state-led multilateral system. But we do believe, like you, that there's a lot of added value about bringing cities and regions to the multilateral system, not only as donors, but also as partners and more generally. Let me now turn to our guest from Jersey. Edward, you here. I can see you. Edward, you are the Executive Director of Jersey Overseas Aid, which is the island's official publicly funded aid and development agency from Jersey. And Jersey has been contributing to pooled funds since a number of years as well, since 2016, starting with the humanitarian crisis in Syria, if my information is correct. I looked into the financial tracking system that is managed by OCHA. So it would also be interesting to hear from you, you know, why you're basically collaborating with OCHA, maybe with other parts of the UN as well. What are the benefits from that engagement and commitment? Edward, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and good morning, colleagues. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but thank you so much for convening this important discussion. Thank you to OCHA and the Global Cities Hub. Before perhaps I speak to the collaboration we have with OCHA, maybe just a little bit of background as to Jersey Overseas Aid and its setup and its status. As you rightly said, we are the official aid agency of the island of Jersey, which enjoys a unique status as a crown dependency. We're semi-sovereign, which means we have our own laws, our own parliament, yet the king is still our own head of state. So that means that we can generate our own ODA, and this year we'll stand at 0.3%. For a population of 100,000, that equates to about just over £22 million. So whilst we appreciate that's below the OECD average, I think for a population our size, I think it's a really, a significant number and achievement. I think something else to highlight is that in living memory, Jersey received humanitarian assistance itself in 1945, and that provides a very strong narrative for us to push our humanitarian agenda forward. Of our annual budgets, roughly 25% is allocated to humanitarian relief. And increasingly, pooled funds represent the most effective and efficient use of those funds. And as you rightly said, we've been supporting the country-based pool funds since 2016, and since then have gone on to produce over £7 million worth in assistance across more than 7 country-based pool funds. And I think it's worth explaining why this is particularly relevant for a small, non-traditional donor like ourselves. We have no outside presence outside of Jersey. Obviously, we don't have any embassies or consulates for which to rely on, in which they could do the essential due diligence on local partners that is so important. Our public demand rightly high levels of accountability and want to ensure that the funding that they're contributing towards is being used in the best places and being used in the most effective manner. It also enables us to reach our localization agenda. As Ramesh rightly pointed out, the role of frontline responders is so critical in emergency relief, and without the ability ourselves to oversight the due diligence on local partners, how do we make sure that they're getting the funding, had the voice that they so rightly need? So I think the pool funds enable that to happen, and the increasing percentage that is now going to local actors, I think is it's proof that this is working, and that the right people are getting the right amount of funds for when a crisis happens. It enables us also to be more efficient with our funds, rather than going back and appeals being launched, pre-positioning our funds at the beginning of the year, because we know there'll be a spike of needs, at some point. It's not a question of if, it's when. And having those funds pre-positioned to enable that fast, rapid response is, again, a really effective use of our limited resources. It, of course, contributes to coordination and tries to, mitigate the fragmentation, which can cause huge amounts of waste in the response as well. So again, another really great use of our funds. And I think it really needs to be highlighted too, that the visibility and the sense of pride that I think our population get from seeing the flag of Jersey alongside other, some much bigger member states, enabling us to say that we're contributing to this, this multi-donor platform, shouldn't be underestimated. And I know that this is, in particular, is a really strong sense of our communication strategy, saying that we're contributing towards a leading UN agency alongside the likes of UK, Germany, France, etc. I think does give us a certain amount of kudos on islands. But it goes beyond financial contributions, and I'd really like to sort of point to the fact that I think Jersey should be held up as a great example of how a small non-traditional donor can play a more active role in this space. We're privileged to have last year been appointed as co-chairs, along with Italy, as the Pool Fund Working Group, which enables us to contribute to the discussion, shape the agenda, and put our priorities on the discussion point. So you're getting a voice and a perspective from a less traditional, smaller donor. Now, I think it's in everyone's interest for the donor base and constituency to be as wide as possible, to not always have the same narrative, but to have different perspectives, because I think that because it needs, I think, those reflections as the funding pressures increase globally, to have those inputs, to have those discussions as well. So that's sort of us in a nutshell. We are very proud supporters of OCHA. We do support other UN agencies as well. We support UNHCR and through them, not only the financial contributions, but also the JPO scheme, which again is enhancing our knowledge on island, can advocate for Jersey overseas, but also contributes to online emergencies at the front line too. And we also contribute to WFP too. We don't currently support SURF, but we do contribute to other pooled funds. And we just see them as such an important and core component of our humanitarian relief. And increasingly, the percentage of our humanitarian funding is going more and more towards pooled funds. So I'll leave it there, but I'm very happy to take questions if anyone did have a follow-up.
Thank you so much, Edward. Super useful, super clear as well, as to why basically you do invest in pooled funds more and more, as I understand. Very important point that you mentioned, that indeed, usually, it's not the case here, but cities and regions don't have embassies. And that's a very important point, because you don't, you're not on the ground being able to follow basically what is going on with your funds. And the question of accountability is very important. And for that, I think we very much trust the UN to be accountable with the money that you put in there. I see some questions. Are there some questions? Not yet. So I know there are quite a lot of cities and regions following us. I don't have the list right now, but I remember Wien, Ghent, The Hague, Bilbao, Athens, Basel, Quebec, Dortmund. I think all of you had registered and probably are online. Don't hesitate if you have any questions to raise to our speakers here. But let me go back to one thing, maybe I can break the ice, about localization. I think all of you mentioned the localization of the humanitarian agenda. It's something that has been going on for quite a while in the humanitarian community, back to the World Humanitarian Summit in 2016 in Istanbul. Could you maybe one of you explain exactly what do you mean by localizing, humanitarian action, and to what extent that is relevant for cities and regions listening to us today?
That's a good question. And it's not easily definable, but basically, traditionally, the major humanitarian actors have been international actors in a crisis setting, where you have little to no resources in existing governments or states, or they're not willing to do so. Right? And traditionally, these organizations were the ones that defined the needs, identify the needs, define the needs, raise the money, and provide the assistance. The participation of local organizations, the participation of local communities was generally absent at the beginning. And I think in many cases, they were not organized themselves because they didn't have a civil society structure before the crisis. So they were just mainly recipients. And what we have increasingly found out is that, first of all, we're not really accountable. We were not accountable to them. We were more accountable upwards. And we would also get the right type of programming on the ground to assist them. So now we've changed this, and it's a long process. And a lot of it came about during the World Humanitarian Summit, as you mentioned, because we had regional groups that brought together local communities and regional communities, which try to define the way that humanitarian programming should go. So there are two ways to do this, right? One is to empower local organizations to be able to receive and disperse and implement programs. And those programs will be tailored very specifically to the needs of the local populations. So the difficulty we face here is that many of them don't necessarily have the capacity to do this. So we have identified ways to build their capacity with our resources. And many of them also were not organized, so we had to help organize them. And the way we do this is through the pool funds, through World Food Program or HCR or UNICEF, developing partnerships with local organizations to address these needs. So local organizations, in a very, to encapsulate, is having those local organizations respond to the needs of local people. But it's a constant struggle because donors cannot or find it very difficult to give bilateral assistance to these local organizations. So whenever you have a drop in funding, local organizations are often the first to be affected. And that's where the pool funds the country-based pool funds are super important. Now, additionally to that, we have what we call the flagship project in OCHA, and in the humanitarian community, where we've identified 4, and now we've added, I think, another 4 countries to that, where we are having the local population sitting at the table of our decision-making process. So they will hopefully be sitting in the humanitarian country team, helping us identify the type of programming that they need. So they will drive the direction of programming. It's a pilot project right now, but hopefully we would like to expand it to all the places in which we work. So, for example, women organizations, and I found in my experience, women organizations give you the most honest detailing of what they need on the ground. But they were not often listened to. We would generally go to the community leader. Generally speaking, it was a man. I mean, in the patriarchal places where we work in. So localizations also identifying those vulnerable groups that are especially vulnerable and help and building their capacity to be able to help us direct this programming. It's a long road. I think funding is going to be critical for that because they do need capacity building, but also we need to give them the platform to hear their voice.
Thank you for that. Are there no questions? Still not. Anne, please, from the Canton of Geneva, and then I have also questions for you. But Anne, from the Canton of Geneva, please.
Thank you so much. So good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. No, not yet. Good morning. Time is running so fast. No, my name is Anne-Dorine Matel. So as Anne mentioned, I work for the state of Geneva. I lead the International Solidarity Service. I'm happy to explain a bit further what that means. But first of all, let me thank you, Antu. Thank you so much for the Global Cities Hub for organizing this very timely discussion. Thank you so much for OCHA colleagues for taking the time to meet with us. And of course, a very big thank you to our colleagues from Catalonia and from Jersey. It's really quite fascinating to hear from your experience. And I think I would have a couple of questions for you. But first, maybe a couple of comments. It was very interesting to hear our colleague from Catalonia, Agusti, if I may.
Yeah.
We have a very similar approach here in Geneva. There is a strong dedication towards supporting international aid. We also adopted a law in 2001 with the same objective, that 0.7% of the Geneva state budget is allocated to international aid. We are exactly like you. We haven't reached yet this target, 0.2, so exactly the same. What is interesting to consider, though, is that this budget has steadily increased over the last 20 years. It is still increasing this year. So it's interesting to mention because it's quite different to what we are seeing currently. So I do want to underscore that. The biggest part of this budget is allocated to humanitarian aid. Currently, we have two concrete partnerships. One is with the International Committee of the Red Cross. The other one is with Doctors Without Borders, Switzerland. We provide them flexible funding. The only requirement that we have is that they try to dedicate that funding to forgotten crises. So all of the crises, which unfortunately there are many more now growing, as you mentioned also, Ramesh, a lot of those crises are becoming invisible. So we ask them to dedicate those funding to those crises. The rest of our budget, our second budgetary line is human rights, so supporting Geneva-based organizations working on human rights. And the third is health. Of course, that resonates a lot with the big privilege that we have here in Geneva to host organizations who have very specific expertise in those areas. So this is why we want to support them to continue their work. Traditionally, I'll come to that, we have never funded the United Nations. It's not because we don't believe in the incredible relevance of the UN, it's because this is a complementary approach that we have with the federal states. So Bern has the responsibility as the MFA to fund international organizations. They sit in your governing boards. And we, the state of Geneva, to complement that, rather supports the rest of the ecosystem, so a lot of the implementing partners of the UN. What is interesting is that in 2023, the practice changed, meaning that beyond the yearly envelope that we have, either our government or our parliament can ask for additional money, and they asked for an extraordinary grant to respond to the humanitarian situation in Gaza. And when we, of course, looked at the critical actors, evidently there was the World Food Programme and UNRWA. And so in 2023, and I would say I have a background from the Swiss MFA, I was quite happy with that decision, which means that last year, we also granted 4 million to respond to the victims in Lebanon, and we supported UNHCR. So we haven't supported OCHA yet, but I would say that now that we have a change of practice, let's hope that we can maybe start a partnership in the future. That's a bit for the context. When it comes to the SURF and the country-based pool funds, from my previous experience, I am absolutely convinced by their relevance. You talked, Anya, and to give you a little secret, Antoine and myself, we're working at the permanent mission of Switzerland, so we actually saw those mechanisms, and we witnessed, I think, how it's fast, it's coordinated, it's inclusive. So I am very convinced. And so this is why it's so interesting to hear Jersey and Catalonia that you are actually contributing to those mechanisms. From where I sit, I know that one of the questions that my local authorities would ask me, and this is why, if I may, I'm asking my question to colleagues from Catalonia and Jersey. I think the first question they would ask me would be, because they have a very specific partnership with those two humanitarian actors, which are based in Geneva, we meet them regularly. So of course there's proximity. We have a historical relationship with them.
ICRC and MSF.
ICRC and MSF. I think they would be very interested to see how local authorities, such as for example, the State of Geneva, how are we represented? Where do we sit in this governance? I think it's a question of accountability, of course. I think it's a question of, let's be honest, the State of Geneva, their day-to-day is not international affairs. They're very dedicated to international affairs. They do have a number of other topics that they have to deal with. And so, of course, they want to understand with a quite big level of granularity where the money is coming. Our parliament asks us a lot of questions, like any parliament. You know, we of course, we have a very specific indicator for women and girls, but we have to justify a lot, more and more. I think everybody's familiar with that trend. So I think it would be interesting to see, when you decided to join the SURF and the country-based pool funds, what was the accountability mechanisms that you put forward? How is this working? And do your authorities come back on that or not? I hope my question is clear. Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you also had a question, a comment, because I want to pull several questions and then give the floor.
No.
No? Okay. Because we have a question online from Maeva Lehmann. Maeva, you're from the Région Occitanie in France. And you're asking basically, and let me read out, knowing the importance of political communication, and you just mentioned it, around the humanitarian intervention, how could a regional authority or city authority promote its humanitarian action through partnership with OCHA better than direct support, basically? Again, a question of accountability, visibility. How do we, you pool all those funds, basically, and most of the time, the contribution from cities and regions, of course, is smaller than states. No, you definitely don't have the means. So how do we ensure that there's visibility? Can it be better than you providing direct support to Doctors Without Borders, and accountability as well? And I give back the floor to OCHA if you can.
No, thanks so much. Great questions, and also really humbling to hear your appreciation for the work we're doing. In terms of how to communicate, what the benefit would be, we have very clear opportunities with country-based pool funds, and Anya mentioned Gaza. At the moment, this is really one of the key tools that we support humanitarian action, especially with those organizations on the ground. Of course, making a pitch, if you consider further support, consider those within the mix. But if you actually dedicate some funding to pool funds, you would automatically be a member of the pool fund working group that Edward already referred to, that meets regularly to also review policies, give guidance, review the current state, and really be the advisory group on how we manage and direct the funding through our pool funds. So that actually gives you a direct opportunity to also have your voice heard. In addition, for the SURF, if you decide, we have regular communication, of course. We have also once a year our pledging conference in New York with the Secretary General, and all of our funders there have the right also to participate and speak and make a statement. And it's always really wonderful to also have the subnational government speaking and providing and their support together with others. So that is also an opportunity for visibility. In all of our reports, of course, the contributions are also being reflected. Plus, we actually have an online contribution system which provides real-time information on every single fund we have, on all the recipients, on all the outcomes, the results. So where you can actually track directly where your funding is going, and you will see it also how it plays out in vis-a-vis contribution from others. So that also speaks a bit to the sense of pride, Edward, that you said. It's definitely also an opportunity to increase visibility to individual crises, to broader efforts, etc. Plus, we are also regularly offering so-called attribution sheets that we are publishing, which are 2-pagers that specifically indicate how an individual contribution from a member state, from a regional authorities, subnational government, from a private sector donor, from a city, if applicable, actually what is specifically being accomplished with your contribution within this pooled effort. And this is usually very helpful when you put this on the table and show decision makers that actually, even if contributions are not extremely large, although we must say there is actually quite significant contributions already, because there are many other member states, etc., that give much less. So we're really grateful also to the amounts that are being pledged and committed there. But demonstrating, actually with little contribution, you're achieving a lot as a part of a global effort.
Can I just add to that?
Sure, please.
Very quickly. Thanks, Anya. Also, you have, for the country-based pool funds, you have the advisory groups in the country. And in some cases, if the donor is not present in that capital of that country, there could also be a virtual connection with that advisory group. Now, that advisory group includes obviously OCHA. It's led by the Humanitarian Coordinator. You have NGO representation on that, national NGO representation on that, and UN representation on that as well. And often in those situations, there are go-see visits, so you actually go and see for your own self the impact of this, because nothing is as good as that, right? Having that first-hand experience. So there are opportunities in which we can sort of tailor-make some of that accountability to address your needs as well.
Just so that people understand, and then I'll give you the floor, Edward. So if you put your money into those pool funds, you have indeed those advisory boards in different countries, basically. And that's the reason why those advisory boards know that, can allocate the money very quickly, because they are on site, just for you to understand the functioning of those pooled funds. So very important. And as you mentioned, indeed, those who donate to those pooled fund, country-based pooled funds, can sit, in those panels to see basically the work of how you allocate, where you allocate, what you do with that money. So it's a very, I think, efficient, effective tool to, accountability tools.
Plus also, I'm just sorry, there is this global level pooled fund working group. And also, this actually provides an opportunity, even if you don't have presence in country, to participate and really review, but also influence policy, which cuts across the whole system actually, because of course we're working also in support of other agencies there.
And it's the global working group on which Edward is sitting with Italy. That's it. And just also to mention the financial tracking system, you mentioned it, Anya, but maybe we can also share the link of this financial tracking system so that people see basically how it works and how precise the information is in that system. Edward, and then Augusti.
Thank you. I just wanted to complement existing comments on the pool fund working group in a bit more detail about the sort of the accountability. The pool fund working group meet in person every 6 months and for 2 days, and 25% of that time is dedicated to accountability. It's an opportunity for donors only to be briefed by OCHA, to have a forensic sort of examination of the funds, go deep dive into sort of the issues as well. And it's a very open and frank discussion about what's going right and what's going wrong. And I think it's hugely valued by the donors to have that safe space on which to sort of get feedback. So I just wanted to touch on that as well, that it's a central part of the in-person meetings that we have every 6 months.
Thank you for that. So indeed, your money, when you put it in there, it's not a black box, basically. You get to see where it goes. Augusti.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add that we have a specific team in our development cooperation agency that works on humanitarian action, that manages the partnership with OCHA and with other humanitarian organizations that we fund. I would say that these accountability mechanisms are part of the agreement. We are on the tracking, not only of the Parliament, and we receive every week questions, and especially in these times of emergency, of new expressions of political views, this time of polarization. So that we receive many questions focusing on why we are intervening in Palestine, or we are intervening in Lebanon, or even in Ukraine, but we have also an internal audit, and this internal audit tracks our relationships with the multilateral system, with OCHA, and I insist with other multilateral organizations, other UN agencies. I think the participation in these working groups, in this conference, this pledging conference in New York every year, is relevant, also to track the impact of your contribution, and to be able to, and also not only to be accountable vis-a-vis your government, but also vis-a-vis your citizens, which are very much following what you are doing in this area.
Thank you, Augusti. And if I may just go back to Maeva's question about, to what extent accountability can be, or visibility is better with the UN, with those pooled funds than, through a bilateral manner, I would say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that's, as you said, real, how do you say that? Real time, basically, information about where does your money go and what it is affected to. And it's also about getting into the club, basically, getting into the club, sitting next to big member states, as Edward has said earlier, and to get information about, humanitarian needs globally. So yeah, these I would say would be the advantages I see, but of course, as you mentioned, both of you mentioned, you continue to provide money bilaterally as well to partners that so it can be a complementary approach, I think. Absolutely. Yeah. And let me go back, if there's no other question, to another question I had to both Edward and Augusti, and maybe also other cities and regions in the room as well. You have a question?
Maybe more just an addition or comment.
Yeah. Let me just go with that one. So, as we mentioned, it's the first time that basically OCHA is having that discussion with cities and regions, but it would be also interesting for us to understand what is the relationship that you have with Spain, that Jersey has with the UK, although I understand you're a crown dependency, you're not part of, of the UK as such, you have a very different positioning. So what is your relationship with your own member states, I would say, in terms of, is there discussion with, where you put your money into the multilateral system? Is that something that you engage in a conversation, open conversation with your own central administration or not? Just to understand how it goes. And then I'll go to you. Augusti, you want to start?
Yeah. Yes, sure. We have a very, let's say, strong relationship with the central government, with the Foreign Affairs Ministry, with the Spanish agency. We are not currently included. There is a mechanism devoted to humanitarian action that includes some autonomous communities, some regions in Spain. We are not within this mechanism, although we are negotiating our inclusion. But yeah, we have a very good relationship. We try to look for complementarities, to work together, funding together certain common priorities in priority countries. I'm not talking about humanitarian action, but also development. So the relationship today, and this is also a political issue, today is really fluent. Yeah.
Excellent. Edward, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, thank you. Yes. Yeah, as we said, so our ODA is totally separate to the UK's. So although we don't necessarily, or we're not guided by their strategies, I think we certainly follow the common principles of humanitarian action. But we do enjoy close working relationship, and we work together. We're members of the Good Humanitarian Donorship Initiative, which is chaired by the UK this year, so we're working with them collaboratively. We obviously engage with them in the Pool Fund Working Group as well as significant contributors. And we are looking to, and through ongoing working partnerships through an initiative on locally led action through pooled funds, which is something that the UK have led and we fed into in terms of best practices when addressing pooled funds, addressing things like multi-year funding and passporting and due diligence. So actually, we have a great relationship with them. It's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily official, it's more sort of informal. We learn from them, they feed into us. And I think it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And it's one thing that we are exploring, which I think could be of real use, is passporting, whether we can perhaps piggyback off, you know, the legwork and the heavy lifting that a bigger member state donor like the UK can do, that perhaps we can benefit from as well. So I think that's a good example of where perhaps that collaboration can bear fruit.
Excellent. Agustin, you wanted to add something?
I forgot to mention, and I think this is also very important, Spanish laws in development cooperation and foreign action include local governments and autonomous communities as recognized partners, always within their competencies, their responsibilities, but in our case, more than 50% of public investment is allocated by regions in Spain. We manage competencies, for example, full competencies in education, in health, so very a strong capacity to intervene in the public. And this is recognized in development cooperation and also in foreign action. So I think also the central government, and this is not a political issue, is understanding that international relations is not anymore a monopoly of the national government, that we are approaching new schemes, more inclusive, more counting of these multi-state, multi-level governance systems, etc. And this is reflected also in the law.
Excellent. But I guess, again, for those who listen to us, you all have very different, you know, like national context. So it does not necessarily apply to, you know, other cities. Flanders, is that it?
Yes.
Can I give you the microphone so that everyone can hear you clearly? Thank you.
And I'd just like to share a bit of our experiences and maybe also help answer the questions of the Canton of Geneva, why we do it. We've been supporting SURF for about 15 years now. We used to have, we've got quite a long tradition in supporting humanitarian aid, but it used to be very scattered, a lot of small budgets to a lot of different organizations. And then at a certain moment in time, we tried to, well, get it a bit more organized. So now we've mainly three ways of supporting humanitarian aid. That's firstly to our partner countries with which we have regular bilateral cooperation programs. So that's more on strengthening their humanitarian infrastructure. It's more like a proactive approach. It has been also through country-based funds, but it depends a bit. It's not always the case. So a certain amount of our budget goes to our partner countries, and it's mainly Malawi and Mozambique. We have ad hoc funding when there's a crisis somewhere, and that mainly goes through the International Red Cross or to the Belgian and Flemish Red Cross societies. And then there's the bulk part going to SEF. So these are the three lines we are financing. And I think the issue on visibility and accountability, that's really very important. Because of course, for a politician, it's always nicer to be able to say we are funding this project and so many water pumps, etc. But I think also with through supporting SERF and OCHA, I think the main motivation is, I relate very much to what I heard from Jersey. You know, it's very flexible. We just heard it can be even in 6 minutes. I'm certainly going to report that back because that's a nice one-liner to share. So, but it's in terms of efficiency, and that's something that's always criticized in humanitarian aid. You know, is it efficient, and how much overhead and this and that. So I think there's a good case for SERF as it's so efficient and agile and can immediately react. So that's something very important for us. And then in terms of also the due diligence and accountability, you know, we follow up in broad lines. How that, well, we're assured if we work with UN, that's assured, and we very much appreciate the transparency and that we can find all the data on the websites. We really use them a lot, the websites of SERF, of OCHA. Whenever we get the questions from Parliament or from the general public, that auditing reports are accessible, monitoring reports are accessible. So that's something that's really important for us to be able to respond to questions from the public or from our politicians or from Parliament. So that's a bit what I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, Flanders. Thank you. So here, you know, although these are trouble. Oh, sorry.
When technology fails.
Yeah. Sorry about this. So we're getting to the end of our meeting, and you hear it, I think, although you are in troubled times, multilateralism in general, we still love you, the UN, we still trust you. We think that, you know, you're accountable, you provide a lot of data and transparency to all the different regions and hopefully cities that basically contribute to those pooled funds. I would like to ask our speakers if there's any last comments, point, concluding remarks that you would want to make before we close the event. Edward, I'm looking at you. Do you want to say something? Yeah.
Just, you know, we, as I said, as big, proud supporters of OCHA, if there is anyone in the room or online that would like to have a bilateral discussion about, you know, ongoing benefits for supporting country-based pool funds, then we are absolutely here to be the cheerleader on OCHA's behalf. We feel that there is an increasing role for non-traditional smaller actors like ourselves to contribute to such important mechanisms like country-based pool funds. So I'm just putting the offer out there. Please do get in contact if you would like to hear a little bit more about what it is to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Much appreciated. Any closing remarks?
No, just thank you very much indeed. I think thanks to Edward and Lucy for going over your partnership with us. I think you are champions for us. It's nothing better than to hear from people who actually participate in the program than from OCHA itself. So, and you know, we will do all we can as well to support this function. But it's a great sign that cities and regional authorities get involved in this, because I think we need to spread the message that goes beyond just the member state donors. There's humanity in all these communities that really want to help, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for that.
Thanks as well from our part. We were very pleased to organize this first encounter. We hope that is not going to be the last one. So to all cities and regions listening to us, please don't hesitate to reach out, you know, either to Jersey, to Catalonia, to OCHA, or to us to basically get more information if you want to about how your investment into humanitarian action can be, you know, as efficient and as effective as possible. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for all those, you know, attending in person. Pleasure, and bye-bye. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.